right, hi class. I'm going to demonstrate how to make an Ecoflask. So here's the tank. This contains a pond water sample from Estabrook Pond here in Milwaukee. Now we're going to be using T25 cell culture flasks. This will be our Ecoflask, where we're going to put our mini ecosystem. So I am going to use this to obtain water samples from all areas of the water column. I want to make sure that this flask that I make is a small representation of this tank. So I want to make sure I get some detritus from the bottom where the detritivores are hanging out. And I want to get water from the middle of the tank. And I want to make sure I'm getting water from the top of the tank because we have primary producers up here. These are very important to our ecosystem. Now I'm not going to completely fill this Ecoflask because we have samples of organisms over there, which I will show you shortly, that we're also going to be adding. But I am going to reach in and make sure I'm pulling more plant material. Now you want to make sure you don't have too much plant material in the flask, otherwise you won't be able to see all the organisms in there. Okay, once I have this set up, I'm going to add other samples that are available. So I'm going to grab a transfer pipette and add, here is some mixed crustaceans. If you can see, some of them are swimming around in here. We have some amphipods and daphnia and other miscellaneous crustaceans. I'm also going to be adding different cultures of animals that will be present in your flask. Oh, here we have planaria. These are a personal favorite. They remind me of little vectors, and they actually have little eye spots. They can't see the way that we see, but they have photoreceptors, so they can sense light. And here we have some rotifers. What we have in here are annelids. So we have some worms, some detritivores. Those will be hanging out at the bottom of the flask. We also have a culture of euglena here. We worked with these in the microscopy lab. So I'm going to go ahead and add some samples of mixed crustaceans. I don't know if you can see this, but I actually have a amphipod in here. Okay, we got some mixed crustaceans. Now I'm going to go ahead and add some other cultures. So I'm just going to different jars and using transfer pipettes to add different species to the Ecoflask. Here's some annelids in there, little red worms. And lastly, I'm going to add some euglena. Okay. Now my flask is full, so I'm going to put the cap on. Now it depends what your treatment is. If you chose dark as your treatment, what you would do now is wrap up your flask in a paper towel after you take your observations. We take our observations first, then add our treatment. And we come back a week later to look at the effects of our treatment. So here would be a dark flask, if that was your treatment. If your treatment was carbon dioxide, what we would be doing is adding 3 to 5 drops of sodium bicarbonate to the flask. Now we don't need a lot because the size of this flask is rather small. Now here we have the fertilizer treatment. If this was your treatment, you would also add 3 to 5 drops. And lastly, if your treatment was light, what you would do is leave your Ecoflask under light conditions, constant light conditions for a week. So now we have our Ecoflask. Before adding any treatments, we're going to use the dissecting scopes to evaluate which organisms are in the flask. And also, we could take wet mounts to see the very microscopic organisms within the flask. All right, thank you guys. Have a good rest of the semester.